We are continuing our story of David, Saul, and Jonathan. When we last left our hero, he had become a fugitive. Saul had thrown his spear at him one too many times, so David left Saul's court in a big hurry. After a brief stop at his house, I'm not sure how long he was there, but apparently he was there long enough to write a psalm. I think the 59th psalm was supposed to have been written when David was at his house just before he escaped from Saul. But anyway, after a brief stop at his house, where his wife Michal warned him he was not safe, she helped him escape from her father's murderous plot. So David ran to Samuel at Ramah, and from there they traveled together to the school for prophets at Naioth. Saul and his men quickly tracked David down there at Naioth, but God sent a prophesying spirit on Saul and his men, and that kind of stopped them in their tracks. So while Saul and his men were busy prophesying, David ran back to the Gibeah area to seek Jonathan's help. So as we opened chapter 20 last week, we saw a very frantic David, not able to understand why Saul wanted to kill him, and Jonathan was still not convinced that his father actually wanted David dead. And this kind of leaves the reader wondering how Jonathan could not see that his father wanted to kill David. True, his father had taken an oath that he would not kill David, but then shortly after taking the oath, he tried to kill him with his spear. And then when David fled to his own house, Michal knew that her father was trying to kill David, and she helped him escape. So we wonder how Michal could have known this, but Jonathan did not know this. So when Saul and his men pursued David all the way to Naioth, Jonathan still could not accept the fact that his father wanted David dead. And so you think maybe it sounds like Jonathan was interpreting his father's actions to fit what he already believed about his father's intentions? Is that possible? What do you think? Do we ever do that? Do we interpret events in light of our own prejudices or our own conclusions that we've already reached?
I think it's the ideal thing to look up to your father and to think the best of your father, and to think that your father would do something that cruel might be difficult to accept.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So he didn't want to really believe that his father would go against his word. Then did he? And Laura says we all tend to believe what we want to believe. I think there's a little bit of Jonathan in all of us. But all that said, though, David and Jonathan did come to agreement that they would test Saul's intentions one last time. So the feast of the new moon would begin the next day. And so David and Jonathan agreed that that this would be a good chance to really understand exactly what Saul's intentions were. David would not show up at the feast as one of Saul's top officials. His presence there was practically required. So not being there would be very obvious. He would definitely be missed, and his absence would require a good excuse. So that brings us to about where we left off last week, and I think that's about verse 18 in chapter 20. Let's see what's going on. Verse 18, chapter 20. It says, Then Jonathan said to David, Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began, and wait by the stone Ezo. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy to say, Go find the arrows. If I say to him, Look, the arrows are on this side of you, bring them here, then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe. There is no danger. But if I say to the boy, Look, the arrows are beyond you, then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember, the Lord is witness between you and me forever. I think the matter that they discussed was a mutual covenant that David and Jonathan had with each other, a covenant of mutual protection, and we'll hit on that in a few more verses down. That will come into play again. But so the scene was set now for Jonathan to have a chance to put his father's true intentions to the test, and that was in the form of the feast of the new moon, which was one of the feasts under the Levitical law. It occurred. I'm not sure whether it occurred the first of every month or once a quarter, but it was a regular feast where sacrifices were offered and they had a fellowship meal together. Lasted 2 to 3 days. Okay, so then in verse 24, it says, so David hid in the field when the new moon festival came. The priest sat down to eat. No, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul. But David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. So the first day Saul said nothing. He actually assumed the best here. He said, well, maybe David's unclean, ceremonially unclean. So that would be the one good reason for missing the king's new moon feast. That may be the only good reason. And Saul would have been willing to accept that reason. But the uncleanness only lasts one day. Once the sun goes down, then you're clean again. So in verse 27, but the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? Notice he doesn't call him David, he calls him the son of Jesse. Maybe a little bit of animosity there in his voice. He's a little impatient now. His anger is starting to seep through. As Stephanie said, a stark remark. Yes. So we're beginning to get a feeling here that things are not going to go well. Okay, so then Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers. That is why he has not come to the king's table. So Jonathan kind of treats it kind of lightly here, doesn't he? He just kind of, he blows it off here, and he says, "Oh, by the way, David said, ask if I could go to Bethlehem," and I said, "Sure, why not?" And so he tries to kind of make light of this, but his father doesn't see it that way, though. So in verse 30, then Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he must die." So now his anger is transferred to Jonathan, and he doesn't call Jonathan by his name. He simply calls him. In fact, he doesn't even own him as a son. He says, "See, Jonathan is now his mother's son, and the son of a perverse and rebellious woman." So he's casting a little doubt there. Am I really your father? So Saul's anger is building up here, and then he says, and then Jonathan attempts to come to David's defense here. He says, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" Jonathan asked his father, but Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. So it took the spear hurled at Jonathan for Jonathan to suddenly, I guess, changed his mind here. He said, wait, my father is planning to kill David after all. So that's kind of a way he would call for Jonathan. Okay. So what do you think? Do you think Saul was, at this point, was he more angry with David or was he more angry with Jonathan? Or maybe with the two of them working with each other on this plot?
Alan,
Yes, Carol.
do you think that maybe Saul is looking at Jonathan as almost like a traitor, a betrayer? Instead of, standing by his side, he's gone over to David. And that's why he called him a son of a rebellious and perverse woman, because I looked up that word perverse because I'm not very good with words, and it says corrupt or contrary. And of course, rebellious is, defiant. So I'm just wondering if he isn't more against Jonathan at this point.
Yes. Good. Right. And as Lawrence points out here, Saul sees Jonathan as a traitor. That's why he calls him perverse. Good, very good point there. Yes. So he's always been a little bit suspicious of Jonathan and David all along. I think he was aware of their friendship, but he was hoping that maybe choosing between the two, Jonathan might choose him rather than David. But Jonathan hasn't. He's chosen David. Yes. Very good. So verse 34 says, Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that second day of the month, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. So Jonathan has finally then decided that now he's got to act decisively. So verse 35 rather, says Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that second day of the month, he did not eat. Verse 35. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. Had a small boy with him. And he said to the boy, run and find the arrows as I shout. Run and find the arrows I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out to him, isn't the arrow beyond you? And then he shouted, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. Okay, those words there, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. They were shouted to the boy, weren't they? But they were intended for David. So he was, did you think he was really telling David, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. The king is after you. So the boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing of all this because Jonathan and David knew. If he had been someone a little older, they might have asked questions about this strange, sequence of events here. But a young boy probably wouldn't ask too many questions. So maybe that's why Jonathan took the young boy out there. Someone who wouldn't ask a lot of questions. Uh, so then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, "Go, carry them back to town." After the boy had gone, Jonathan got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. It says David wept the most. David was the one who was just about to become a fugitive, wasn't he? His life had been upended on him here, and right now, as far as he could see, his future was very, very uncertain. Last week, no, yesterday, we were talking about nihilism, about the meaninglessness of life. Do you think at this point in time, David may have been feeling a little bit nihilistic?
Well, there are some pretty depressing psalms that David has credited for writing.
Yes.
There's some very, very sad psalms that David has been said to have written.
He probably wrestled with this feeling in life, didn't he? You know, when you think about it, his you know, he was on the run now as of this moment. No food, no shelter, no weapons, and as Laura pointed out, see, David didn't have a very happy life. A lot of turmoil in his life, both before and after he became king. Yes. Very good.
Alan?
Yes.
Do you think at this point maybe he might have even been wondering why he was ever anointed? Because I mean,
Yes.
because of everything that's happened to him, and maybe that takes in what you're asking about. Was he a little bit nihilistic at this point because he's going, I don't even know why I was anointed. Why did this all happen? I mean, look what's happened to me since. Nothing very good. Nothing very good. And like you said, now he's on the run and you know, not knowing actually what's going to happen to him. So maybe he's even questioning why all this started. Why did I get anointed in the first place?
Right. His life did look very good at this point, did it? He probably didn't see too many reasons to be hopeful. And on the other hand, see, Jonathan was going back to the palace. He was his father was mad at him right now, but his future seemed, well, we aren't sure what Jonathan thought. Well, see, Jonathan knew that David was the anointed, but I'm not sure how Jonathan felt about his future at this point. Whether he felt the same way. You know, he had all the necessities of life and then some. At this point in time, see, David had nothing. He'd even, at this point, he wasn't even sure when he'd see his wife again. And so, you know, so he had to be pretty depressed at this point in time. So, what about us? Do we have those times in our lives when things seem to be looking down and we don't see much hope for the future. We don't see much hope of things changing for the better. And we begin to wonder, what's the point in life? I think we probably talked about some of these things last night, didn't we?
Alan,
Yes.
I mean, I think that that's something I have felt before. And I think, when we feel like that, we must dig deep to reorient our spirit to God.
Yes.
We must dig deep. That's something that I think that I felt before, and I've talked to others who felt that before. And, when those times come, we must dig deep to reorient ourselves to God. That's why I think that the practice of spiritual disciplines is so important.
Right.
Mhm.
Very good. Yes, exactly. And as Stephanie points out here, it says David made Saul look good, and he probably wonders, instead of Saul appreciating what he did for him, why he is now an enemy of the king. Good point there. And you're right though. And you can see it in David's Psalms. In Psalms, at one point he'll be, he'll be, moaning his state in life and wondering if things will ever get better. But and then as you continue reading the psalm, it's like he will revive again, and and he will praise God. So he goes back and forth then. Yes. Okay. And then Laura says it's hard to stay disciplined sometimes because this level of distress and feelings of hopelessness can be paralyzing. Yes, they can. Absolutely. Yes. It's not always easy. Sometimes David makes it look easy within the scope of one psalm, but we don't know how long it took him to write that psalm, though. Whether he sat down and wrote that psalm in an evening, or whether he wrote it over a period of days or weeks or months. We don't know that. And suddenly, as Laura says, you don't want to move forward when you feel hopeless. Yes. Good points there. So that's kind of where David was at this point. But then it says, Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town. Somehow I got a feeling that David didn't exactly go in. I can see peace right now. Jonathan said the right thing, but David's heart probably wasn't in it at this particular time. So where could he go now? There was probably not any place in around Shikabia that was really safe at the moment. But David needed a couple of things. He needed food, and he needed a weapon, something to defend himself with. And right now, he had neither. So that's what gets us into chapter 21 then. Okay, and then Mark makes a note here, says, people without hope lose vision and purpose. People without vision perish. Good point, sir. Okay. Chapter 21. So at this point, David has no option but to flee. he had to flee or he would be killed. And now even Jonathan has come to understand this. So uh, uh, so, uh, so David's as we get into chapter 21, the year is probably somewhere around 1018 BC, and David would be probably sometime around in his early 20s, maybe around 24, 25 years old. So he's still a young fellow. So the first three verses of chapter 21 says David went to Nob to Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered, Ahimelech the priest, the king, charged me with a certain matter and said to me, "No one is to know anything about your mission and your instructions. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me the loaves of bread or whatever you can find." So why would David showing up? Nob was probably the place where the tabernacle was at this time. This is the first time we've read about the tabernacle since back in Eli's day. So now the tabernacle pops up again, and this time it's at Nob. So why would Ahimelech be suspicious of David showing up there alone?
David is known as a commander of men in an army. He's the leader who goes with his troops.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. Good. Thank you, Tom. Very good. Okay. So so David is accustomed to Ahimelech is accustomed to seeing David traveling with servants, or with other soldiers, and now all of a sudden he comes into camp alone, and he's hungry, and he probably looks probably rather shaken or disheveled there, and so Ahimelech is a little suspicious, and Ahimelech certainly doesn't want to incur the king's wrath, does he?
I mean, I would definitely be suspicious of David as well. I would be suspicious of
Yes.
David as well. I mean, if anybody knows the politics of developing countries and developing nations, anytime a big country, albeit America's done this, Russia's done it, China's done it. Anytime they want to overthrow a country, they oftentimes will go for the general. They oftentimes try to corrupt the military
Yes.
troops. And so the military will stage a coup and get rid of the executive branch. That's the reason why a lot of underdeveloped countries, they end up having dictators. So you don't have to worry about, so the dictator becomes the military leader and becomes the executive leader as well. So you don't have to worry about coups from your military leader. So if you got a person that is a military leader, has military might, and he's going around, and there is political talk around him, and now he just pops up and shows up where you are. I mean, I think that most people would be very suspicious of this person. Like you will be suspicious. You'll be concerned about David's presence.
Yes, yeah, unfortunately for himself, Ahimelech did not go with his original suspicions, did he? He let David talk him into providing him with help, with food and a weapon. And Mark points out that Ahimelech was fearful for David and for himself, believing an armed contingent would provide military power and protection. He was not relying on God, but on worldly power. Good. Thank you, Mark. And so Ahimelech, immediately wants to know, why he's alone. And so, does David tell him the truth, or does David lie to him? David lies to him, doesn't he? Tells him a lie. Is this one of those situations where lying was okay, or as if lying were ever okay, or did David really have a choice here? What do you think?
Well,
Is
he
there
always
ever-
has a choice.
is-
You always have a choice. May not be a good choice. You have a choice, so he could have trusted in God and, gone with that, but he didn't. And he could have trusted Elimelech not to betray him, and he didn't do that either. So he was trusting in his own wisdom, which is probably not a smart thing to do ever, but that's how we are. We get fearful, we do bad things.
Yeah, okay. That may have been, I guess in hindsight, we might say that she made David, should have chosen to tell the truth. But if he had, Ahimelech would certainly not have given him any aid. And so then David would be in a very tough situation there. No food, no weapons.
Yeah. I don't think David had to lie. I mean, he did, but I think this is different from the Hebrew midwives.
Okay.
It's different than Rahab and the Hebrew midwives. But I'm also very curious, Alan, about your thoughts about David eating the showbread. I mean,
Okay. Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah, we'll get to that in just a minute here. Yeah, in fact, that's the very next thing coming up here. There's also the issue with the showbread here, wasn't there? Yeah, let me read those verses. He said, now that what you have on hand, give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find. But the priest answered David, I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women. And then David replied, indeed, women have been kept from us as usual. Whenever I set out, the men's things are holy, even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today? So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. So the bread of the presence in the tabernacle then remained there for a day, and then it was removed and replaced with fresh bread. And over in Leviticus, we learned that it was set aside strictly for the use of the priests. In other words, they could eat it, no one else could. However, it seems that that Ahimelech seemed to have no hesitation about providing the bread to David. See, David explained that they were on a holy mission for the king. Well, I guess if you consider that the king was God, well, I guess David was, but obviously that's not the impression that, of course, Elimelech got. But so there seemed to be no question in Ahimelech's mind that is okay for David to eat the showbread, and Jesus over the Gospels well, there are scriptures in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that all where Jesus uses this as an example of the fact that God is not a legalist. The laws, the rules that God put into place were intended for the benefit of people, never to be used against them. So actually, I think it would have been wrong for Ahimelech not to give David the showbread. And Jesus points out to the Pharisees when they were objecting to he and his men, he and his disciples walking through the field, plucking grain and eating it, and because they were doing it on the Sabbath day, and Jesus points out that God always intended his laws to be for the benefit of mankind, never to be used to their detriment. Anything else on that? Did you any follow up on that, Lawrence?
I just was going to say that that's a lesson that I think people really struggle to understand. I mean, I really pray that one day Christians can come to understand what Jesus is communicating about the showbread and David.
Yes. Yeah. We see Christians tend to be more legalistic than God is, I think, and God, everything that God commanded us was for our benefit, and if something is applied to the extent that it does not benefit someone, well, then we're probably misapplying it. Okay. But there's trouble here, though, isn't there? Someone is there that we find later has David concerned. Now, one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. We're not sure what detained before the Lord means. Apparently, he has some. It could have been any number of reasons why he was there at the tabernacle, but he was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's head shepherd, and so he was there taking this all in. Listening very carefully to what was going on. David asked Ahimelech, "Don't you have a spear or a sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon because the king's visit was urgent." Again, Ahimelech must have had to think twice about this. He said, "Now, why would a soldier, a warrior like David, ever leave home without his sword?" So, but Ahimelech though doesn't make any too much of a fuss about it. The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no sword here but that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." So, not sure how. This is the sword that David would have used to kill Goliath, to chop off his head, and so we don't know what route it took from David to the tabernacle, but now it's back in David's hands again. Okay, moving on here. Maybe we'll actually get through chapter 21 today. Okay, this is David at Gath. That day, David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Okay, this was, of course, in Philistine territory. Why would David go to Philistine territory? Especially to Gath. Gath was a hometown of Goliath. So that's where Goliath was from. So it's almost like David is jumping out of the frying pan into the fire here, so to speak. As Lawrence points out, it was a good hiding place, sure enough. It was a dangerous hiding place for David. He probably wasn't too sure how he was going to be received there. What if they recognized Goliath's sword? But see, David probably had no place else to go where he could get away from Saul. As far as getting away from Saul was concerned, the Philistine territory was probably the safest place.
Hello, Alan.
Yes.
I think David going into Philistine territory really speaks to the power of Saul.
Yes.
Speaks to how powerful Saul was, that David would rather go on to the Philistine territory than stick around at home and run the risk of running into Saul's people. Right.
Yeah, probably wasn't any place that he could hide in Israelite territory that Saul would not find him very quickly. We've seen that already. It didn't take Saul very long to track him down at Naoth. Saul knew almost immediately where he was. So there wasn't really any place that David could go to get away from Saul except the Philistine territory. So it says, but the servants of Achish said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." So it's not like he could hide there incognito. They recognized him almost immediately. This is David, and she had a reputation for killing Philistines. He had a reputation for killing Goliath, and they recognized him. They said the king of the land. Well, they obviously knew that Saul was king of the land, but I think they were speaking to David's popularity here, and they saw him as an up and coming soldier who probably would be king of the land one of these days. So the question is, how did the Philistines feel about David being there? David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence, and while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. So, so the only way that he saw himself being able to survive was just to feign insanity. Back in those days, people who were insane were considered to be, I guess, touched by God, or one of the gods. They were, it was probably considered to be more of a, I don't know, perhaps a gift from a god rather than a liability. And so if you ran across someone who was insane, you just let them alone. And that's kind of what David was hoping that the Philistines would do, would be to just leave him alone. And it appears that worked. Achish said to his servants, "Look, at that man, he is insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of a madman that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" So Achish didn't really want to have anything to do with him either. He just said, "Keep him out of my sight." And I guess basically the idea was leave him alone. So that's how David survived his stay in Gath. Something you might want to look up later is Psalm 34, which the superscript over Psalm 34 says that it was written while David was in Gath. So after the class, you might want to turn there and read that psalm. In fact, I think Psalm 56 also has a similar superscription to it as well. So I think both psalms are related to David's stay in Gath. So I'm not sure when David wrote the Psalms. I guess he had, but he did, though. I guess one way or another, though. So anyway, that brings us to the end of chapter 21, and next week we'll start on chapter 22 with so now David is in the desert, and he's we're finding that everyday life is a challenge for him out there. Just keeping food and keeping shelter. Spending his nights in caves. Living in caves. Caves may be fun to visit, but I'm not sure I'd want to live in one. Probably wouldn't be a very accommodating place to live. In fact, the darkness of a cave might tend to push you toward nihilistic thoughts. You're there in the darkness and the damp cold and all that. So, but we'll read more about that next week, though. So, thank you for your comments tonight, and we hope to see you back next week. And I guess Lawrenson, are you going to take the prayer request for us?
I just want to tell you, Alan, that this was such a fantastic class. I mean, I'm really on the edge of my seat. Like, I really mean that. I'm genuinely excited for this class every Thursday. And I just look forward to learning more from your insights on Samuel and continuing to enjoy robust conversation from the brothers and sisters of the Westside Church of Christ. Our dear brother, Tom Harley, has agreed to do the closing prayer and also collect prayer requests. So I now,
Okay.
yes, sir. I pass the microphone to our dear brother, Tom Harley.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome, outstanding class. If you want to type your prayer request into the chat, that's fine. Or if you want to speak up now, please speak up.
Tom?
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah. I'd like to have prayers for Daniel. He